Ever wonder what makes really creative people tick? Where do their ideas come from? What keeps them energized? What kinds of things get in their way? Is their life really as much fun as it looks from the outside? Hello, I'm your host, Lily Pierpont, and this is ArtStorming, a podcast about how new ideas come to life and become paintings, sculptures, plays, or poems, performances, or collections. Each episode, I'll chat with a guest from the arts community and explore how the most creative among us stare down a blank canvas or reach into the void and create something new. When I met my next guest, Lauren Snyder, her name was Stephen Snyder. We had both moved to Santa Fe around the same time and were moving in the same circles, attending the same events and gallery openings, and by that time Stephen was already presenting as a woman, but hadn't introduced the name change yet. Striking in appearance, whether as Stephen or Lauren, her paintings are equally bold and dynamic. Listen as we learn about the elements of a life lived as a work in progress. All right, I'm here with Lauren Snyder, and I've had the privilege of knowing Lauren since I practically first moved to Santa Fe. And I'm not going to do much more of an introduction right now. I'm going to just start asking you questions right off the gate.
Sounds great.
We've got so much to cover. One of the questions I've been asking everybody to start with is to tell me something that listeners wouldn't be able to learn about you from just looking at your website. So that's probably a lot.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to learn a whole lot about me from looking at my website, just because I'm lazy in that regard and not a technology person, and I just don't mess with it that often. You know, part of me and art is, and why I waited until 18 years ago to start doing art. The reason I waited was I didn't want money to have any influence on what I was producing. And I briefly studied art in college. I was, quote, an art major, but I have to tell you, I did not learn to do art. I learned a little bit about conceptualization. I got no technical skills. I don't think I ever took a drawing class. Mm-hmm. I did a couple of hard edge paintings, actually on triangular canvases, because I'm always trying to think outside the box. So instead of painting on rectangles or squares, I built triangular canvases. And
well, that's a feat in and of itself.
Well, it so happened that my first art teacher was also a woodworker in college, and showed us how to work with wood. And I was able to build these kind of complex frames. But the reason I waited until 18 years ago to start was, as I said, I didn't want money. My view of art, and I didn't take on art as a career when I got out of college, because I guess I just had this image of struggling artists. Mm-hmm. And I know from my time now being a part of the artist community that a lot of artists struggle trying to make a living. It's like maybe 10% make a decent living, and the other 90% times are tough all the time. So I didn't want to struggle or try and raise a family and do it doing art, and I didn't want the effect of money on it. So I waited until my plan was later in life. I had a career, like a 30-something year career in real estate, of buying and selling homes and renovating them. So I had a lot of design work in my business. But I waited until my kids were out of college, out of the house, winding my business down, and then I started painting. And really, until I started in 2006, I never showed anyone my work. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if I was doing anything that would be considered art. I'm pretty much self-taught because I had none of the technical skills. So I went on for many years just producing.
Let me just ask you a question. Mm-hmm. During that time when you were not producing, did you have a notebook or anything that you were capturing ideas, or you were just able to put a pin in it knowing that once you got going, it would just, the muse would...
I didn't know what would happen. And frankly, what happened was, so I bought my house in Santa Fe in 2002. just on a whim. My former wife and I were vacationing, and we just bought a second home here. And 2 years later, my realtor stopped by, and I told my realtor, I said, I'm going to build an art studio onto the house someday because I'm going to start doing art. And he goes, build it right now. I said, well, I'm not doing art. He says, trust me, build it right now. So he got me an architect and a builder, and boom, I built this studio, but I wasn't doing art. So now I had a studio, and it took me, the studio was finished in 2005. It took me a year until 2006. I did not know how to start doing art. How do you start? I didn't have a clue. And finally, I went to like Michael's, and I bought these inexpensive paints, inexpensive canvases, inexpensive brushes. I thought this is just all practice. And my first things I did, I used to, in driving back and forth, I lived in Denver to Santa Fe, I always shot pictures of the sky. So I pulled out some of those photos that I really liked, and I tried painting them. And those were my very first pieces. And then I started doing some abstraction, which is what I found is my true love, is abstract work. So it was that starting that was the hardest part.
So you created this studio. Is it working for you? I mean, it's pretty, given that it being an interior designer myself, usually one has to kind of know how they want to use the space before you build it, but you built it and now you're figuring
it out. Well, I had
a
good architect.
That's great.
A guy named Rob Wellborn, who used to live in Santa Fe. He moved to Palm Springs. Rob really connected with me, and he designed it. There's things he did that I would change now if I were doing it. Like he put these really big windows in, which I wouldn't have. I'd want more wall space, and I just have windows higher up. But other than that, he did this incredible design. These patio doors open out onto a private patio just for the studio. It was designed so it could be a casita. We put a full bathroom in it, a kitchen area. And, but, I wasn't using it. And finally, when I started to paint, I was still living in Denver. I was just down here occasionally. So I set up a studio in Denver in a room that I had. And then I gradually set up stuff down here. So when I finally relocated here in 2015, I had 2 studios, which I combined. And so I had double everything, which is why I think I told you before we started, I almost never buy paint.
Yeah.
I have
You have some of those original
I have the original paint from 2006 that I started with, and to this day I still use it.
That's great.
Yeah. I have a very different approach with materials than most artists. For me, there's no expiration date
right.
on paint.
Right.
And I'm sure high quality artists won't use paint that's old or something. To me, it just takes on a different form. Mm-hmm. And if it gets thicker, then I use it for texture. So materials are never out of date for me.
That's great. And you said you transitioned from triangular canvases to the material that you use to paint on now. So say a little bit more.
Well, so when I first started painting, I bought some real inexpensive canvases. And I also started painting on boards because I've always been a woodworker. I'm really I've been in the construction business for years. I know all the trades, all the construction trades. I know how to do them all, and I've always worked with wood. So I had a lot of scrap wood. So I started painting on wood, and I just found I like a hard surface so much better than a flexible surface of canvas. I do a lot of collaging. Sometimes I want to nail stuff in, which you can't do on canvas. But you can, it's a lot easier especially to collage onto a hard surface than a soft surface. So, my approach is very different because I did not set out to sell art. I never showed art to anyone until, I want to say it was 2013 or 14. My former wife and I were down in Santa Fe, So I had all this artwork here that I'd been doing over the years, and I said to her one Saturday, I think, I said, you know what? I'm going to put some signs out in the neighborhood, art sale, just see what happens. So I made some real quick signs. I still have the signs. I planted them out on a couple streets, and I live close to downtown. And so a car pulls up, and this woman and this man get out of the car, and this woman's walking around. She's looking at my art, and she says to me, "You're very talented." I said, "Well, I don't know if I have any talent because I've never shown my art to anyone. So thank you for saying that." She said, "I'm Jennifer Esperanza." And I immediately knew who she was because I had seen her photography work in magazines here. So her future husband was with her, who was her boyfriend at the time, Richard Kurtz, who's a fabulous painter whose work I collect. And Jennifer said to me, "You need to have a show." And I said, I don't know anything. I don't know how to do. She said, so a week later, she said, "Let me borrow a piece of artwork for an hour." And she left, and she came back an hour later. She said, "You have a show in November at Capital Coffee Company." So
that's awesome.
All of a sudden, I'm going to do my very first show. And it was so exciting. And
was it nerve-wracking or just exciting?
It was just exciting. Just figuring out how to hang a show, what to put in the show, how to do labels for all the artwork. It was just an amazing thing. And it wasn't any big deal. And I don't know if maybe I sold a couple pieces. I think it was up for a month in there. And then I went back to Denver and I applied to do some shows at the rec centers in the suburbs where I lived. And I got 3 shows in 3 different rec centers. Wow. And since then, I've shown in Miami, I've been in Art Basel, I've shown in Los Angeles, Denver, of course, and done multiple shows here in Santa Fe. But I never set out to make money. And I've gotten to the point now, I don't like pricing art, I don't like selling art. Jennifer Esperanza represents me and sells some of my work, but I do not take any money from the sale of my artwork. 100% of the profit from my art is donated to Girls Inc. of Santa Fe.
That's amazing.
And I don't know if you know what Girls Inc. is.
I know a little bit, but why don't you say more?
Well, Girls Inc. is a national organization, and it's a program designed to lift up girls at a young age. They start basically in when they're 6 or 7 years old. They have after-school programs at their facility here, and they have in-school programs helping girls become confident. Well, their slogan is strong, smart, and bold. And that's what they do with the girls that they work with. So many of them go on to become leaders. Most of them go on to graduate from high school and move into some form of additional higher education. So it's an amazing program, and my whole thing in life as a transgender woman, having discovered, and I didn't transition till I was age 66. So having entered the world, the female world, and getting an inside look of what it is like to be female, and to look at how the world treats women, and my goal is to try and balance the world with women in at least equal leadership roles in the world as men, because I believe that's a way to a better society. Mm-hmm. So the goal of my art is to help change the world a little bit at a time. I cry when I talk about this.
It's beautiful.
Because it's so emotional for me.
Yeah.
To have my art do some good.
Well, you said earlier that you first started painting clouds, and as I look around your studio here, obviously your commitment to women's issues is very evident in the fact that most of your subject matter are women?
Well, 50%. And
Okay.
I'll tell you what happened. I never did figurative work. When I started painting, I did some landscape work, and I did mostly abstract, and that was, I found, is my true love, was doing abstraction. So, until I moved down here in 2015, I never did figurative work. And one day I did 2 faces, and Jennifer and Richard Kurtz stopped by, and they looked at these 2 paintings, and they said, "This is the best work you've ever done."
Oh, wow.
So then what happened was I started painting women's faces, and just women's faces, women's bodies, in a very fun way, not
Super realistic.
no, not realistic at all.
And this is before you transitioned.
No, this was when I started transitioning.
So were you playing with,
Well,
the face?
here's what I say. As I started painting my face each day by looking in the mirror and applying makeup, I started painting faces on surfaces doing the same thing, and it became my interpretation of what I see that makes women different from men.
Interesting.
What is going on with this face? And you'll see a theme if you look at and by the way, we have a new book that Jennifer just published of my women's faces. If you look at all these images, you'll see similar themes running through each image, even though they're all vastly different. The things that always accentuated to me that set off women from men was cheeks, blush, lipstick, and eyes, and the makeup around eyes. And that's what you see in my women's faces and how I work with that. But that face work is really just half of what I do.
So say more about, I have 2 questions that want to come out at the same time. One is, how did painting faces affect the way you painted your own face and, kind of come into becoming more of the woman that you feel that you are? That's one question. And then the other is just to say more about the other part of the work that you do. But I'm kind of curious about the first one first.
The faces. Well, it's really the way I paint my face is what influenced how I paint those faces.
Uh-huh.
It was the things that I did to change my face, because it's really difficult when you have a male body and a male face to feminize it.
Well, you're a beautiful man. You're a beautiful man, and
Thank
you're
you.
a beautiful woman.
Thank you.
Easier for you probably than some, I would have to say.
I have to tell you, I am so blessed that I did not have some heavy beard. Some men shave, and you still see after they shave a shadow.
Yeah.
I fortunately was not a hairy male.
Yeah.
So my body is not covered in hair, and my beard I could make really go away. So that was the challenge, and it still is to this day, to try and feel good about how I look. An interesting thing that I did was there's a lot of Halloween parties, as you know, in Santa Fe for adults. So my first year here, which full year was 2016, going out for Halloween, guess what I did?
You went,
In drag,
yeah, sure.
as a man.
Oh,
Drag for me is dressing as a man.
okay, right, of course.
Right. So I went in drag. So I went out on Halloween. I did a lumberjack. I went to parties with at least 50 people who knew me, that see me all the time. And I can tell you that no one, zero, not one single person knew who I was. Nobody.
Really?
Really. And this was
How did that feel?
so affirming.
Oh, wow.
That I had made my presence so different from the male that people, when I appeared as a male, had no clue that I was the woman.
That's amazing.
And I've pretty much done it every year on Halloween. It's like my kind of joke to the world.
Yeah, I have to
go as
see
a
you on
man.
Halloween because I can't even imagine. I guess I can just Santa Fe in 2016, 2017. So we sort of arrived at the same
Sure.
time. And ever since I've known you here, you've been in the form that you are.
Yeah, when I moved to Santa Fe in November of 2015. I was married, and what kicked my brain into gear was when I saw Caitlyn Jenner on the cover of Vanity Fair, I think, was where she came out. So I saw this magazine cover, and it was formerly Bruce Jenner, and something happened in my brain. Literally, a switch flipped, and it was not some instant thing like, oh, I can be female. It just slowly, for that first year, started happening, and I started telling some old close friends, lifelong friends, about what was happening with me. And my wife started noticing changes, and she finally said, I don't know what's going on with you. And I said, I don't know what's going on with me either. We'd been married 30 years. She said, why don't you go down, this was in November 2015, she says, why don't you go down to Santa Fe? We have a home, take a month, try and get in touch, figure out what's going on. I got in the car, drove to Santa Fe, and the second I pulled off the highway into town, I knew I was never going back home. And I didn't. And that was the end of that
Chapter.
The end of that chapter in my life. And I began this whole new chapter telling people I was transgender. It's really kind of a funny thing, because for the first 6 months I was here, I had a male wardrobe. Mm-hmm. Never even dawned on me to have women's clothing. I was wearing makeup, telling everyone I was transgender. So my daughter sent me a thing in the spring of 2016 about a transgender art fair in Miami. So I entered this, and they selected me to be in this art show in Miami. So I flew to Miami for my opening, and one of my female friends here said, do you want to borrow some of my tops?
I was going to say, what were you going to wear?
Well, so she said, do you want to borrow some of my, she said, you don't know anybody in Miami, wear a couple of my tops. So I borrowed some of her tops to wear, and I get down to Miami, and it was a incredible experience, because I met all these transgender people and gay people in that community, had a great show, and this woman did a story on me for the Miami Herald, and she and I have since become like very close friends. So I get back to Santa Fe from this trip. I'm washing the clothes to return to my friend, and once again, a flip switches in my brain. Why are you wearing men's clothes? So all of a sudden, I went out and started going to thrift stores mainly and consignment shops and looking for women's, various women's clothing. And I started building a wardrobe, and I purged all my men's clothing.
Well, I ran into you at Ooh La La once, and we were kind of like going for the same blouse at the same time. And I remember having a good chuckle about that.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, she's got great taste.
Well, women's fashion became so exciting for me. I got to tell you, I was female my entire life. And I knew by age 14 that I didn't want to be dressed like men. I wanted to be dressed like women. And I just, in my brain, that said, there's something radically wrong with you. Don't ever tell anyone that. So I was closeted until I was 66. And the other thing was, I never felt like one of the men, one of the boys. I was afraid of men, and I just never had that feeling like I'm one of the guys. But my dad died when I was 7. I made the assumption that it was not having a father that made me think I wasn't like the other boys.
Oh, wow.
So I had this bad information in my brain that kept me closeted until I was 66, until Bruce Jenner set me free.
Wow, that's quite a story.
It's a miracle that I was able.
Is your mother still alive?
No.
Was she? How would she have been with this?
My mother loved me so much. She wouldn't have understood it. It's like I have a brother who's 92.
Jeez, wow.
He was from a different mother. 17 years older than me. My brother said to me after I transitioned, he said, I don't understand it, but it's okay. And I said, Jerry, I don't understand it either. It just is. I figured it out that I was in the wrong body all this time. So, yeah. But anyway, we're making this more about trans life than art.
Well, I mean, it's certainly at the bedrock of what you create and what you...
Well, it's part
it's like,
of...
how can you separate that from your artwork?
Yeah.
And really, again, this series is as much about how do we address anything that we come across in life that sort of doesn't fit in the box that we know it for. Art is usually an arena where we expect something a little bit unusual. So it's a vehicle, it's a bridge to another exploration. And so, you're living that whole other exploration. Yeah. Some of it lands on pieces of wood and turns up as an art piece, but you're kind of a walking version of it. So it's all part of it.
Yeah, the whole thing for me with art, and why I said I didn't want money to influence it, I'm all about experimentation. So my view of traditional artists is they find a niche, people love what they're doing, and they do that particular work over and over and over again perpetually. I like to continually experiment and try crazy new things with materials and just trying to come up with something different. It was like the triangular canvases.
Sure.
When I was in art school. I wanted to do something different than everybody else was doing. So this not having a financial component to my art is what's been able to allow me the freedom to do whatever the heck I want. And I've told you that in the past, my materials are mostly so unconventional. I work mostly on found materials. Mm-hmm. Wood that I find, boards, old... People would call me up when they found out I do this and say, I have some old wood stacked in my yard. Would you like it? And I'd be right over at their house bringing that wood home. Like my neighbor across the street was in construction for a while, and he'd always bring me his construction waste. Just boards, scrap boards that got cut. So the painting on found wood, and a lot of the paint I use... So people say, well, what kind of paint do you use? I said, I will use any type of paint or material except oil. Never worked in oil. I don't want to work in oil. I don't want to be around fumes and chemicals and cleanup. So I've always worked in water-based paints. But I buy house paint from Home Depot and Lowe's, what they call mistake paints. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's just all these different colors. I have tons of that. I use house paint. I use acrylic paint. I use pencils, pens, markers, glitter glue from the dollar store, just any kind of crazy materials I can come up with. I have a whole series of my work that's called the Street Trash Series. I used to have a dog when I was married, and whenever I would walk the dog, or whenever I still take walks by myself, I find stuff laying in the street. It might be a smashed can. It might be something that fell off a car. I just find interesting trash laying in the street, and I bring it home, and I have boxes of it, and I incorporate it into my artwork. And each of those pieces is labeled part of the Street Trash series.
So I mean, your life is about transitioning to its core. I mean, you take an object and breathe new life into it so that it can have a new experience in the world and be experienced in a new way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's all about it. I didn't set out to be a recycle artist, but I really am a recycle artist because most of the materials I use are being recycled. All this wood that would end up in a landfill is material. So I want to tell you about, this will segue into the second thing you asked, right, which was about the abstract work. So I'm going to tell you this crazy thing that developed almost from day one from painting. So I grew up in a Depression era parents and grandparents. I lived in a house with my grandparents also, in a duplex. So if anyone who knows, who has been around Depression era people knows you waste nothing. Yeah. nothing. And that was ingrained in me growing up. So when I started painting, I would get a piece of wood to use as a palette, and I'd put some paint on it, and then I'd go over with the palette, and I'd paint on whatever I'm painting. And then as soon as I was done, I still had paint on the palette. And I could not let that paint go to waste. So what happened was, my studio in Denver was in my wood shop. So I had all these boards laying around the studio, just stacked up. So I just took the paint, went over to a random board, and just put that paint on the board. There wasn't any logic to it or form. I just took that paint and somehow just applied it to that board. Now, what started happening was, the next time I painted, I now went back, and here's a board that I had to put some paint on. So now I'm going to put more paint on it, but now what happens is intention comes into the mix. There's no intention in that first putting of paint. But in the second go around, I'm adding paint to paint. So I start placing it a little more strategically. And as that process developed, I started creating entire paintings on these boards that after a few years, I decided I have to give this a name. And the name of these paintings, they're called paint catchers.
Cool.
Because they catch the excess paint. So
they would happen over a long period of time as you have extra paint.
Some of those boards would get painted out in a month. Some of them would go for years. Years. If you look in my studio, that big piece up there,
yeah,
I painted on that for 2 years, and part of the time it was outdoors. It was just in the yard, and because I go sometimes in the studio, if I don't have a board to get rid of that extra paint, I just walk outside my door and there's boards stacked out here, and I'll just throw paint on a random board. So some of these things go years, and they develop into. I'm so in love with my abstract work, probably much more in love with it than spectators are. And
well, you've been having a conversation with it for such a long time. I imagine you develop a kind of intimacy with it.
There's so much intent in that work. As these things progress, I start adding little things, collaging in little things. It could be anything. It could be a piece of metal. It could be some scrap I found on the street. It could be a picture out of a magazine. But all over these abstract pieces, there's stories. So what I would say, and my goal is to do an abstract show here in the next couple of years. I've been working on a body of work. What I say about these abstract paintings are, unlike a lot of paintings in a gallery where you walk through the gallery and look at a painting for a minute or two and then move on, if you're not looking at my paintings for 5 to 10 minutes, you're missing most of the story. I find myself looking at walking up to paintings in my house of my abstract and looking. Sometimes I'll stare at it for 10 minutes. Things that I've been looking at for years.
Well, that's a test of a good piece.
Maybe it's just
in my opinion.
Thank you, but it's just me. So what I tell people if they're looking at my abstract work is, it's more like a book. It's not something you glance at the cover. You've got to go through it in depth if you really want to appreciate what I did. And if you do, and you take the time and you look and study these pieces, you'll find surprises that will amuse you or inspire you or something. You'll just find, well, oh my God, I didn't know that was there. What's that? And so
I'm curious, in that process, if you've got multiples going on at the same time, do you come across something and you know which narrative, let's call each piece a narrative, you know where that one belongs? It definitely doesn't belong on this piece, but it definitely does belong on this piece. I mean,
no, it doesn't happen that way. I'll have things. I always have all kinds of stuff laying around to collage in, and I'll just look at something and walk over and find a place to put it in. Some of my work, and I know your listeners can't see this, but if you look up on the wall and you see that thing that looks like a tree,
yeah,
that's just from me hiking and seeing this little branch on the ground and going, that looks like a little tree, and bringing it home and creating a painting behind it, and then nailing it onto that painting.
Yeah, giving it a context.
Yeah, so I knew when I picked that up on the ground what I was going to do with it.
It's great.
I find, smashed, rusted out cans hiking that later, because what happens is I look down and I see it. When I look at it, I know what it is, what it's going to become. Like I see a face.
So since you've embraced your, I don't know how to really speak about it, but since your transition, since you've embraced this real part of yourself, has that given more life and freedom to your artwork? I mean, do you feel more liberated to do your art now that you've embraced that, or is it always it's the same as it ever was?
No, because I really think I've been liberated in my art from day one. Because of the path I chose, that it would not be dictated by sales or money. That it would be just pure creation of whatever was inspiring me at the time. But what I consider to be some of my best work are these things called paint catchers, or a lot of my abstract pieces. They didn't all start out as paint catchers, the abstract pieces, but a lot of them did. And those, there's just so much thought and energy, and in my mind, creativity goes into that work.
Well, it sounds like it's a wonderful reservoir to collect all the thoughts and ideas and experiences that you have over the course of your life, and then you just like a journal. It's almost like a visual journal that you just are recording these moment to moment experiences, and then they kind of become a work of art, a little work of art, and then you move on and do another one.
Yeah.
I think that's an incredible thing to be able to do. Like, you have experiences that come in, and then you have a vehicle for expressing them, so you get to be energized by it.
Yeah.
Do you ever come into the studio and there's nothing to say, or?
Well, I have long periods where I don't paint at all.
Say more about that.
Well, I just go more in streaks where I get excited for a while and I'll paint, and then I go for a long time and I don't paint, and the inspiration is just not there.
And do you feel like, is there an internal conversation that says, I really should get back in the studio, or are you really cool with yourself?
Well, I'm cool with myself. What happens is, and why I need to go to more art openings, every time I go to an art opening or a museum, I come home inspired. It's looking at work always excites me and inspires me to want to create by seeing other people's creations.
Are you inspired by other art forms? Music, dance, anything like that?
Well, music, there is music on in the studio 100% of the time when I'm painting. So I've often said, I don't know if I paint so that I can listen to music or if I listen to music so that I can paint. I'm not sure which is true, because I love both things so much. Music is so inspirational to me, and especially on my mood. It's really a mood lifter if you're listening to music.
And is there a particular, can you look at particular paintings and know what kind of music you were listening to at the time?
No, it's not that kind of level where the music really has anything to do with the painting at all. No, there's not that connection.
It's just that it puts you in a space.
I just feel good when I'm listening to music, and if I'm painting, I want to feel good about what I'm doing and be excited about.
And is there a genre of music that you listen to?
A lot of more Latin themed.
Really?
Well,
that's colorful,
danceable music. I love to go out and dance there's a lot of that going on in Santa Fe. I love going out for live music here. I do it regularly. I go to a jam every Sunday at Tiny's. And
I didn't know there was a jam at Tiny's.
Well, it's only been going on for 7 years.
Oh, wow. That's good to know.
Every Sunday from 4 to 7. I've been going for 6 years to that jam.
And it's just sort of a disc, like dance. Music is played and people dance? Or
it's musicians show up and sign up to play.
Okay.
So they rotate musicians on and off. There's a house band, but then they rotate musicians on and off the stage. And they'll get, 20 musicians will show up every Sunday. And so there's a constant change of players and a lot of dancing. And it's just, to me, I'm very irreverent. I call it church.
Sure.
That every Sunday I go to church because this is where I go to commune with lovely people and feel this love and energy and good vibes in this atmosphere every Sunday. And to me, that's what my religion is to be kind and generous and love people. So that's what I feel when I go to this event.
Well, there's a very generous component to your church because the work that you do with Girls Inc. I mean, you're a very generous member of our community. And in addition to Girls Inc., you've also contributed that wonderful Housewives of Santa Fe. So I'd like you to say a little bit about what inspired that.
This is probably the craziest thing that ever happened to me. So I moved to Santa Fe, let's call it it was the end of 2015, beginning of 2016. I moved here and basically start a brand new life because I didn't have any really friends. I had my neighbor across the street who I'm good friends with and a couple other people, but really I had no friends to speak of that I would hang out with. So I met a woman who lived in the neighborhood and she was retired and she and I started going to bars together and we started meeting other women. So I just started having a group of women around me because all my new friends, when I transitioned, I didn't hang out with men anymore. I was only hanging out with women because I figured I'm going to learn from women. So after a year, it's now February of 2017, and I know 40 women in Santa Fe. They don't all know each other, but I know them. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to create a Facebook group. I'm going to give it a joke name, a funny name. And so I started a group, and I named it The Real Housewives of Santa Fe. And I invited through Facebook, through Messenger, I invited these 40 women to a cocktail party at my home, and I put in there cocktail attire preferred but not required. I brought some refreshments and some wine. These 40 women pretty much all showed up at my house, dressed up. We all sat around and talked and enjoyed each other, and the women that were there were saying, oh my God, this is so great. Why don't we do this all the time? So all of a sudden, somebody says, well, I'll do this next month at my house. And we started having party after party, and the group started growing. Started with 40 women. According to Facebook now, I don't believe this number, but Facebook says it's 550 women.
That's amazing.
Here in Santa Fe. I don't believe that's a true number because I think these groups get populated by things called bots.
Yeah.
So I think it for sure is hundreds.
Yeah.
It's for sure several hundred women. So I don't know what it was that I created here, but it was some crazy thing. And it gave me this view of the female world that I would have never had because I would be at these parties and I look around the room and I see these, it would break down. We'd had 50 to 70 women at every party. And I'd look around the room and everybody'd break into smaller groups, 5 or 6 women, and they're talking. And I looked around the room and I said to myself, there's no equivalent of this in the male world. There's no such thing. You'd never have 50 men say, hey, let's all get together and have cocktails and visit and have a social time.
Right.
So it showed me this whole camaraderie and sisterhood that exists in the female world, which is so wonderful. I'm so blessed to be a part of this group of the women's world. I'm just so blessed because I love everything about it. I love the energy that exists in the female world. It's
and did
a
you
totally
feel? Have you
different
felt
energy.
completely? I've been to a few of these parties, and they are marvelous. And I've gotten to meet some really cool women that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten to know. And were you always felt? Did you feel received by these women?
Oh my God, I would get up at a lot of these parties and I would just say, why don't you speak for a minute? And I would get up and talk. And I said, I want to thank all of you here today for including me in your group, because this group isn't about me. This is about all of you. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this group. So it was so empowering for me to be received as a female by all of these women. Women in Santa Fe, I gotta tell you a strange thing. And I can bet you there's not a trans person on earth who could make this statement. I have never, in the 8 years since I've transitioned, I have never had a negative experience. Ever.
Wow.
I don't think it's anyone could make that statement who's trans. It's something negative. You know, somebody didn't say something about him or approach him or laugh at him, or I've never had a negative experience.
In the male or female community?
No, never, nothing.
Which is a perfect segue to another question I've been exploring with people, which is, I like to think of Santa Fe as more of a state of mind than a geographic
Oh
region.
yeah, it's definitely.
And I think a lot of artists are drawn to Santa Fe for the light, yes, for the region, for the multiculturalism. But there's another quality to Santa Fe that I think you're tapping into here that I'd like you to say a little bit more about in your experience.
There's an energy in Santa Fe, and when I meet people that come here for the first time, and it happened to me the first time I came here back in the mid-90s, I came on a trip. And the second I came into this town, I knew I loved this place. Santa Fe either gets you or it doesn't get you. And if it gets you, you have to be here. You want to live here. There is some kind of energy and love. It's like the best of both worlds, this town. It is a small community. And I grew up in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So I grew up in a small town that really you could almost see it as a sister city to Santa Fe because it's the capital of Wyoming. This is the capital of New Mexico. It's a high altitude, high plains city at 6,000 feet. We're at 7,200 or 7,000 feet here in the same size population. So for me, this was almost like coming back home to small town life. I love small town life, but you either love that kind of lifestyle or you don't, because you're in the grocery store and you're waiting to check out, but the person in front of you who's checking out is talking to the checker and they're talking about how the kids are doing and what happened, and you just have to relax and go, this is what the pace is here.
Yeah.
You can't be in a hurry. Mm-hmm. This is life where there's just love in this community. Everywhere I go, people are so friendly here. That's what people notice when they visit here, how friendly the population is and inclusive.
And even though this is a community that has a huge number of artists living in it, you don't sense a competitive atmosphere in the art arena at all?
Well, it's interesting. I fortunately thank you, Jennifer Esperanza, for bringing me into the professional art world, because before I met Jennifer, I was just somebody doing art in their garage or whatever, this little wood shop that I had, and Jennifer propelled me into the world of professional artists. And when I moved down here and started doing shows, I started getting respect from all these accomplished artists that I met that lived here that viewed me as a contemporary. And I remember I was out in those early days, and somebody introduced me to somebody else. They said, oh, this is, I'll use my former name, which was Stephen. They said, oh, this is Lauren Snyder. She's a great artist. And I just said to them, oh, no, no, no. And this other artist friend of mine looked at me and she said, whenever someone says that, don't ever say what you just said. Just say thank you very much and accept that compliment. So I really had to start respecting myself and not thinking of myself as some lesser artist.
Welcome to the world of women. I mean, I say that, tongue in cheek, but also for real, because it's one of the things that we all have to learn as women. And one of the great things you're doing with Girls Inc. is to set young girls on that path of not being apologetic. And I think that those of us who grow up in a certain era of that generation where, there was still a lot of apology for being a woman. So,
yeah.
You're kind of coming into being in the women's world at a time
absolutely.
when women are actually have a better sense of themselves than if you had done this 20 years ago. It would have been
right.
a harder thing to do.
A whole different thing. Women, men are very kind to me here, but women here embrace me. I walk down the street. There's some woman walking towards me. I get this smile from women that is so wonderful. They just look at me like, good for you.
Yeah.
They're like giving me a stamp of approval for entering the woman's world.
In a weird way, I mean, I've never thought about it this way, but in a weird way, you're wanting to be a woman, or you're expressing yourself as the woman that you are, kind of affirms to us women that we're something worthy of being. So it's really, you are affirming us by choosing to be part of our camp.
Interesting that you say that, because maybe that's part, like I say, there's this mystique that I've never understood of why women were drawn to me when I created this group. It was like I felt like a magnet, like drawing women in. So maybe that's a very good point.
Yeah, I think that you're right in that there's a hunger for women to gather. It's one of those things that we've done historically, and it's a way that women express themselves and see themselves and know themselves, is to gather together and have these exchanges. And men don't have that, or haven't in recent times have that, whether it's technology or what causes that. But the work that you've done in bringing us women together points to me to a missing in the culture for men to have something similar. And I don't think that you can speak to this as a man also, that I would imagine that men do have a hunger to connect, and that it's not just that you grew up fatherless and with, the sense of being a woman, that you're, as a human being, that there's a desire to connect. So speak a little bit about what that's like for you.
Well, I've always felt that the people closest to me have never been family. It's always been my friends. And I moved when I was 9 years old from Cheyenne to St. Louis. St. Louis is where I grew up. I was there 40 years. And those friends I met at the very beginning when I was 9 years old, we're still friends to this day and talk all the time and are linked as tightly as we had ever been.
Men, boys and girls at that
men.
Men. Oh.
Yeah, all my friends. I had a few female friends, and my girlfriends. I've always dated women. I still date women. I'm attracted to women. I'm not attracted. And with trans people, it's about 50-50, whether you're attracted to men or women as a trans woman. Mm-hmm. So, my old girlfriends from the past, I've stayed very tight with a lot of them and had just for years and years. I've got women friends that go back 50 years. And
the friends that you were referring to that you met as a boy, mm-hmm. and that you've maintained friendships with, how have they been with this transition?
Fabulous. So empowering. I mean, one of my oldest friends, who unfortunately died a couple of months ago, we met when I was 10 and he was 9, and we lived on the same block, and we've been lifelong friends our entire lives. He's interestingly done photographs of me for 50 years he photographed me at different times. I started, it's a segue, I started an Instagram page. I gathered all these photos from him because I'd have him shoot. I knew at times I wanted to look different, and I'd have him shoot pictures of me where I knew I was trying to look feminine. And I gathered all these photos up, and I started an Instagram page called Just Lauren's Life. And it's a photo essay of my life that goes back to almost birth and takes you through all my years up to the present and shows all these photographs of me at different stages of life. And there's some where when I look at them, I clearly see, and I know, because when I grew my hair long as a hippie in 1969, I would look in the mirror to see if I was pretty. I wanted to look like a woman. I was so excited when men started growing long hair. So I knew in the back of my mind this thing about being female. I just couldn't actualize it. But you can see it in these photographs. And it's why I put this Instagram page up. And it just goes into the present with current photographs. And
well, talk about a work of art. What an interesting, alive work of art.
It's a photojournalistic view of my story. So I just put it out there for anybody who was interested in seeing what this journey looked like.
Wow. And do you have a sense of where it's going?
That, well, yes. I want to take and put it into print. So I am going to work on a kind of a biography of how my life, I consider my life one miracle after another. Because when my dad died when I was 7, the morning he died, some man who was a friend of the family stood outside in the yard with me. This was in July. And I was this little boy, and he said, "Stephen," I had a mother and an older sister. He said, "Stephen, you're now the man of the family. You're going to have to take care of your mother and your sister."
Whoa, that's a mantle.
That's like something you would never say to a child.
Yeah.
But that message, when it went into my brain, computed as, oh my God, I don't have anyone taking care of me anymore, and I'm 7. So what happened was I became the most self-actualized, creative. I knew that whatever was going to happen in my life, I had to make happen. And I became so industrious, and I started working when I was 12 years old and never stopped. Opened a savings account with $10 when I was 12 years old. And that account's still going. I just started saving my entire life because I was terrified about being poor. And it made me the person I am today. So that was the first miracle. And then I had people throughout my life 3 specific people who totally changed the path of my life. Where I was going along on a path and boom, it changed. And it's a whole nother story than what we're talking about here today. But it's a story I want to put into words, a story I want to be told about these miraculous things. One of them was the day Jennifer Esperanza showed up. Mm-hmm. She completely changed the course of my life the day she showed up. And she's one of those 3. But the fact that I came out at age 66, I consider a miracle. That, the words that came into my brain when I saw Caitlyn Jenner, the quote that came into my brain was, "If not now, when?"
Sure.
And it was like, there is no when. You only have right now if this is ever going to happen.
I didn't know you before.
Yeah.
I know physically you look different because you pull that charade at Halloween every year. But do you really feel that you're that different from the person that you've always been?
No.
And so
no, I truly believe I was a female born into a male body, And I've been a female all my life. And it just now I can express it.
Mm-hmm. And so do you feel like there really is, since you know both sides of it, a difference between being female and male?
Oh my God.
It's not just sort of a continuum, there's a definite...
It's... I've done some writing about this, journaling about this, that you can never know what it's like to be a man. And a man can never know what it's like to be a woman.
Except you can.
I can. I'm saying you can't, as a woman, ever know what it's like to be as a man. And a man will never know what it's like to be a woman. I've had the privilege to experience life on both sides of this. And it's so different, so starkly different. And it's, part of it is this sisterhood camaraderie that I label it. Mm-hmm. Women, because women were bred as caregivers. Women were always raised to be caregivers. That was the traditional role of women throughout history, as caregivers. And women take care of people, and they take care of other women. Yeah. And there's that thing that I see that, you'll see, I'll be at, I hang out with women all the time, and I'll be with a group hanging around with women, and I'll see two women sitting over on a chair with one with their arm around the other one, just embracing that woman. And that's the kind of thing, that kind of love, where it's just, yeah.
So I'm curious about this too. Do you have friends who started life as women who feel like they are men? And have you had conversations with people like that?
No, I have not actually. It's funny, I never synced with the trans community when I moved here. I've just always been a mainstream person. I never tried to get involved with the trans community. I went to a couple of meetings for a transgender support group, and these people were just trying to figure out how to do it. And I was like, I just started doing it. I had no qualms about it.
Yeah.
So I never really related to this thing. Never really felt of myself as a transgender person. I just think of myself as a woman.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons that what I've had people tell me is, mostly women, the reason they're drawn to me is they see authenticity and somehow have this respect for someone leading an authentic life. That's what's been described to me. I've never put it in those words in my mind, but that's what people see. I know who I am.
Yeah.
So I haven't done a lot of the things that trans people do. I have not done surgeries or hormones or voice training or any of these things, mainly because of my age, and I didn't want to screw with my health and take a chance of messing with chemistry or bodily. So, because in my brain, I know exactly who I am. I'm a woman. Whether anybody else sees it or respects it or acknowledges it doesn't matter to me, because I know who I am. So,
so one last thing, I think that would be a perfect thing to kind of close up on. Do you feel pretty? Do you finally feel pretty? Because I know so many women, regardless of whether they're women. I had this discussion
yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah, I have a woman staying with me right now for a couple days who's visiting, and we were talking yesterday, and I said, I have dysphoria from time to time, because I said I look in the mirror and if I can see any kind of maleness, but I usually look in the mirror and see a woman. And I said to her, I've really been having a hard time lately because I don't feel like I look that good. She said, welcome to being a woman, because this is how women feel all the time.
That's right.
Like you don't look good.
Right.
So
and aging compounds it, right?
Sure.
So
yeah. And
like learning how to do makeup on skin that's not behaving like it used to in our 20s and all of that. It's a thing.
I was self-taught doing makeup. Nobody taught me how to do makeup.
Well,
I just bought it and I started doing it. And women over the years have approached me and said, I don't put much on a daily basis. Like I don't do my eyes very much. But women have approached me and said, oh, would you teach me how to do eyeliner? Or would you teach me how to do eyeshadow? But it goes hand in hand with those paintings of women. And I said I started by painting my own face. And I had to learn how to paint this face to make it female.
Well, that's a perfect place to wrap it up. Lauren, this has been so much fun, and I can't wait to come back again and see your next body of work or attend your show of abstracts. So we'll put the URL, we'll put your website connected in the episode notes. I might put a few images of your work up so people can see these faces that you're describing. And I'll see you at the next art gallery opening.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of your project. I'm honored to be a part of this. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you. Terrific.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Please like and follow us on artstorming.org, where you'll find a list of our shows, a transcript of this episode with links to the guest page, as well as our other projects. ArtStorming is brought to you and supported by ArtBridge and listeners like you. Look for us on your favorite podcast platforms.